Congratulations. The government has officially found a way to take care of its own problem by getting the slaves to eat the slaves. And what that means is the world governments have opened up the market of human trafficking and have made it appealing to the everyday person, in this case, the everyday American, to help purge the rest of America and Americans. Women being taken is especially a problem in America, especially for Black folks, because, without Black mothers, how do you get Black babies? So, what this is a genocide. And it's only in the beginning. It's going to get much worse. Males are taken, adults, children, babies are taken. But this is a genocide under the guise of human trafficking, sex trafficking. And don't be so quick to classify every disappearance under sex trafficking, because when they're taking these people, they're being used for various different things. Pharmaceutical companies are buying people to experiment on, to extract chemicals and organs. Satanists need human sacrifices. There are people who are breeding human beings in dark places, whether it's a basement or underground government facilities. People are being bred, people that aren't on the grid. If you don't know about them, they're not on the grid, then nobody's looking for them. You have your cannibals, If you watched a previous video, you'll see that in Asia there are people that eat aborted fetuses in soups. If you would eat a human baby or manufacture human meat, which is what has been done in China. As a matter of fact, Nigeria had a complaint against China because China was sending them meat. They were sending them human meat and saying it was animal meat. And there are people in Nigeria who are familiar with how human meat is, how it smells, how it tastes when it's cooked. And that's how they were able to determine that China was duping them and sending human meat. So where are they getting this meat? It can't possibly just be from their citizens. The Chinese have been trafficking their own citizens, certain segments of their own population, for organs. But here in the States, this is genocide. You take away the Black woman, you can't have Black babies. Most of the Black men are in prison. And Black people pose the greatest threats to themselves because they kill themselves more than anybody is killing them. So, again, when you look at the demographic shift, which is intentional and destructive to the indigenous inhabitants and the standard red-blooded American population, which is comprised of Black, white, and some Hispanic, well, they're currently being replaced by Asians of various types. The Mongoloid brand, the South Asian, also known as Indian, and everything else that's classified as Asian is being used to replace. Why? Because they're submissive and they're more in tune with submission, basically. These are typically people who are in line with white supremacy, and they are the most submissive to white supremacy. Asians, particularly people from India, who generally tend to be colorists, racist. Well, can't say that they're racist because they're not a race at all. They're derived from Black people, but as a separate tribe, they've developed these complexes. So when you look at the replacements, Asians being handed the medical industry, they're replacing doctors left and right. You have the opioid epidemic, which I believe was engineered and orchestrated by our own government. I'm not convinced at all that the Mexican cartel is actually run by Mexicans at all. When I look at the type of killings that they perform, it has all of the blueprints of how people tend to be murdered in the Arab world with that level of brutality, a lot of beheadings, a lot of savage, animalistic, backward stuff. Now, the cartel is pretty rough, but I'm just not convinced that it's Mexicans that are in control or running it. You might have a front person, a mouthpiece, or, an agent, an asset that is the face of the operation. But I don't at all believe that that's the Mexican, that the Mexicans are organically running that operation. Why? Well, it's powerful, it's lucrative, and why wouldn't our government go in and crush and control? I mean, we've done it. We can do it, and it was likely done. This wouldn't be the first time a mouthpiece was outed as a CIA asset, as we know with Noriega and others. So back to human trafficking. This is a clever guise for genocide, not just for Black people, but to make room for the replacements, and the replacements are largely the Asians. This is not an unusual or first-time tactic that has been used by those who are running the show. This has also been the case in Polynesia, when the Polynesians, or the Melanesians who are Black, the original Hawaiians and everyone in those islands were Black. When those areas were colonized, those people were replaced by Indians and Asians. So current day Polynesia, while you'll see people there with nappy hair or coarse hair, and some Africana or quote unquote Black phenotypical attributes, you'll mostly see pale or yellow-skinned Asians, okay? Because the original people were replaced. Same thing in South America, specifically Guyana, with the Blacks who are indigenous to that space. They were invaded, and Indians were moved in there, and the colonizers paid the Indians because, again, the Indians are the number one submissive, white supremacist leaning slave type. Those are the ones they're very submissive, and that's why they're always used, because not only will they do the job, but they'll do it better than anybody, just out of sheer self-hatred and just patheticism, if that's even a word. So Asians are always used in replacing indigenous populations, and that's what we see happening in the United States right now. We've watched it unfold in Europe, and Australia is already heavily populated with Asians. So the West is actively being destroyed, and quote unquote, human trafficking is just one of those guises being used to cover up genocide. So up in Toronto, Canada, a couple weeks ago, there was an article that came out regarding teachers, police officers, doctors, and some other public type officials. I think it was religious. Someone, maybe a priest or somebody, were all busted in a sting. And I believe it was like anywhere from 40 to 70 people were busted in a sting regarding sex trafficking and human trafficking. So, I mean, it just goes to show you that this is everywhere. People are being incentivized to get involved in trafficking, and the kind of money that could get something like this up and going would have to come from some sort of a governmental body or some sort of major corporation that had the money to pay to buy people. Okay? So with human trafficking comes slavery, and the slavery, and the type of slavery that people said for years would come back, or the kind of slavery that people don't realize is slavery is actually here. When you open up our borders, which is happening now, and we're allowing people, the government is allowing tens of thousands of people without due process to come in through New Mexico and enter, this pool, our country. And then they are being given benefits and that sort of thing. This is the other end of population replacement. But what happens is that those people are being incentivized by materialistic aspects, mainly welfare, because there's not enough work for everybody, right? So the ones that are coming here are being incentivized. They were incentivized from the beginning from NGOs, non-governmental organizations, which are funded by people like George Soros and others. Those people sit at the top of the agenda. They fund those people, they incentivize them, they move them up in caravans. And so here we have slavery. This is slavery. This is the rehatch and restart of slavery. Because more than half of those individuals are going to be receiving some sort of a social benefit without even paying into the system, and which is essentially socialism. And what socialism does is it really just takes away choices. I mean, it looks good, it's packaged nicely, it's something you've never had coming from the third world garbage can you came from. And so, everybody thinks it sounds great, it looks great, but you get here and you realize it's just another form of control through the guise, or through the means, of materialism. And so this is how slavery is then reinstituted. There are many ways to fight a war. There are many ways that wars happen, that wars are occurring, and there are many ways to enslave people. I mean, you can enslave people without them even knowing that they're enslaved. And slavery begins with the mind, and it then comes wrapped neatly with all these gratuities and options and choices regarding materialism and freedoms that they were purposely deprived from where they come from. And when you think about this in hindsight, I mean, that all could have been part of the plan, keeping these countries poor intentionally, so that, they would be the wild card in the future. You would pull out that wild card, and then you have people who have been starved economically, who have always lived in poverty, and you then fan them up north into a developed country and offer them all kinds of benefits and freedom and passage into the country. And then you tell them that you need their votes, and then they're registered illegally, and then they're protected from breaking the law, or they're protected from prosecution for breaking the law. So this is how slavery is reconstituted. This is how an original population, and when I say original, I mean original people based on the official start of a country's history. I mean, the original people in the Americas were black people, but once the United States actually became its own country, obviously there was a mixed group of people. So the lineage from those mixed groups of people, black, white, and some Hispanic or Spanish speakers, would constitute the original group. And it's that original group that's under attack with these tactics from mass illegal immigration and legal immigration, because a lot of what we're seeing are people who are given visas. You know, we still have a very broken immigration system. And also from these covert, I'm going to call it a covert operation because, you know, an industry so big and so lucrative, you know, it's impossible that, you know, these governments don't have their hands in it.